Hey guys, it's Roderick, and I'm here again for another episode review of The Handmaid's Tale. We're on season 5, episode 3, Border. Um, well, I have to say I was trying to gauge my hopes for this episode, and I have to say it definitely lived up to my expectations. I tried to keep it somewhere in the middle, but it was a great episode. First of all, with the title, at the end of the video, we'll discuss a bit about why it's called Border and what exactly that means. So before we get into the review, I want to say one of the things I really enjoy, or two things I really enjoy about The Handmaid's Tale, is first of all, the way they use June and Serena as foils. Now, a foil in literature, or typically in literature or in television or film, is when you have two characters and they are opposite of each other, or they're going through totally opposite journeys. And typically they use foils in literature or film to really show the difference and the space between them and what really can be navigated between the two characters. We kind of saw this very early on, the first early seasons of The Handmaid's Tale, where June and Serena were really set up as foils to each other. Serena being the free one, close to both were in close proximity of the white male power, but both were getting different treatments superficially, but underneath they both were getting the same type of treatment. So that's one of the things that I really like, is they really use June and Serena as a foil the question is, who's a foil to whom? Is June the foil to Serena, or Serena the foil to June? So that's always a very interesting thing. I would say sometimes it changes, and we definitely saw this in this episode, and we'll kind of dive into that. The second thing I really like about The Handmaid's Tale is their use of subtext. As we discussed in the last episode, subtext is when the writer has a line in which the actor delivers it, but what they're saying really is not about what they're saying. In the last episode, it was Commander Lawrence's statement about hockey being beautiful, elegant, and brutal. And in this episode, there were some really great uses of subtext in this episode that I thought were really good. So it was always good just to know, because again, if you're a connoisseur of television or film, to kind of know these terms and their uses, because I think it gives you a greater appreciation of the material that you're watching. So let's jump in. So first we have the teaser. So remember, the teaser is the scene before the credits roll, and we see June. So what's interesting is, in acting, a lot of times when actors are rehearsing for a line or rehearsing for a scene, depending upon the method they use, most actors use called the Meisner Method, from Sanford Meisner, the method that one of the methods I was instructed under. There's a thing called the scene before. So typically actors will rehearse or live in a truthful moment prior to the scene actually starting, so that they can then carry on into that truthful moment. I mention this because the scene starts off with June just sitting in her sofa, and all I can imagine is her scene before is she just repeating over and over, "I told you this bitch wasn't shit. I told you this bitch wasn't shit. I told you this bitch wasn't shit." Because all June is sitting there is jiggling her leg, angry, holding her head, rubbing this picture, is like, this bitch ain't shit. So then comes in Luke with the "Are you okay?" Which I was like, are you okay? Did you not see what just happened? So then here comes Jiminy Cricket Moira. Luckily, the Handmaid's Tale's deities heard us, and because I was like, Moira needs to find her some business, she found her some business this episode. So Moira comes in, lets her know they've been charged with the refugee network. And then June is like, why didn't you tell me there's a network of people who are getting messages in and out of Gilead? And Jiminy Cricket Moira's like, well, they're not the people you need to be dealing with right now. And June's like, bitch, you're living in my house. Done enough with you trying to tell me what I need to be doing. Let's make this happen. Moira is the type of friend who tells the alcoholic, you know alcohol has a lot of calories, right? Like, it's not working, Moira. So again, she wasn't so Jiminy Cricket in this episode, but it started off and I was like, I am not gonna be able to do this. And she's gonna be Jiminy Cricketing the entire episode. So Act 1 starts off, and June and Moira go to meet Lily, who's in the outpost or whatever, And what we see, I see something that is a callback to last episode. It wasn't, hi, my name is, this is Moira, this is my friend June. It was like, hey, and June was like, I'm June Osborne. Very much a callback to what we saw last episode with Serena about the Waterford name having power and weight. So what we both see again, the use of foil, is June recognizes that her name has some weight in the Handmaid refugee, Gilead refugee circles. Because the next response was, oh, I thought you'd be taller, meaning that they have told stories and talked about June, and June knows this. So I thought that was like a very interesting callback to you see both June and Serena both using their name to have some weight to kind of throw around. Once again, we'll see how well that works out at the end, but we'll get there. So then we go to Serena, who's just giving us full pregnancy fish, just long dress, big stomach. And Chuello is sitting here fiddling through the cards, and I was like, I'm not saying you need to find you some business because you're like whole ass in the CIA, but what type of tradecraft is this? Like, I recognize the United States has fallen. We don't have the same military infrastructure, but I'm sure you were trained at Langley at some point before the fall of the United States. Like, I'm just confused on what's tradecraft, and tradecraft is spy work. What type of spy work are you doing? Like, I'm just like, huh? So anyway, they did chit chat, and then he admits, and then Serena's like, yo, you know what? I think the United States, I know the United States is not happy with this, and he's like, well, there's a way for me to, to apologize about the miscommunication with, Fred Waterford. And then she's like, okay. And she's like, well, it's probably all for the best, and, you should probably get going. She's like, wow, you worry about your reputation? You're pregnant. And then he's like, so here's our first use of subtext. She goes, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. So on the surface, you would think that she's talking about the Marthas, but the subtext is Serena is suddenly letting Chuello know she has plans that do not include him, okay? And like Boo Boo the Fool, he's gonna go all the way to the end and find out that fat meat is greasy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. But that is an excellent use of subtext. When she says, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea, that is her telegraphing to him, I'm about to make some changes and you're not in the plans. So he's just like, okay. So the question really is, do you really think Chuello caught on at that instance that Serena was up to some bullshit? But it's Serena, she's up to bullshit all the time. One would think you should always be on guard, but whatever. Okay. Anyway, and also what's kind of upsetting is, and as this kind of the frustration as we'll dive into the delusions, Serena really thinks that she is really safe in Gilead. And as we'll see, part of the whole stunt was not so much about giving Fred a proper funeral, but in her case of kind of cementing in her mind her place in the Gilead infrastructure or national tapestry. She really thought that she was going to be a Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis type of figure in Gilead with this whole big parade and procession. So once again, she let Chuello know, I'm doing my Jackie O thing and you're not Aerosol Onassis. So we tittle on. Now, Lily takes Moira and June into the camp, and I'm gonna call the group the Roadrunners, because like coyotes are like the people who like move people across the borders, but they're not really moving people across the borders, they're kind of staying across the borders. So I'm gonna call the group of women Roadrunners, not to be pejorative of anybody who's a undocumented migrant or whatever, but I think it's a cute name because they really are at the borders. It's like Coyote and the Roadrunner. I'm calling them the Roadrunners. So the Roadrunners there, and they show up, and they're just really giving June and Moira the side eye. June didn't even try to be like, hey, I'm June Osborne, because they really didn't they gave a fuck who they were. They were like, so they show up, and then they go inside, and they go inside this cabin, and then they see all the pictures of all the people that they've been able to get out. And June's like, wow, okay, power to the people. And she's like, well, look at all the people we didn't get out. So we see all the pictures of those, and then Lily reveals that they are actually Mayday. Now, if you recall from the earlier seasons when June and the Marthas and Rita were starting their kind of organized resistance, it was in in conjunction or in the furtherance of May Day. But ultimately, everyone kind of became disenchanted because no one thought May Day really existed. It was like, if May Day really existed, why haven't they shown up yet? Who's running May Day? Where is May Day? All this stuff. So June really lost faith in the concept of May Day because they never really thought it was real. So when June finds out that May Day is really just pockets of people moving, trying to subvert Gilead, she was like, damn, if I had known that, then I would have moved differently back in the day. Such is the story of life. But we find out that this is really another May Day outpost in Canada. So now we move on to Serena and Chuello arrive at Commander Lawrence. What I really like about this is the way the setup of Serena and Chuello moving, it really gives you like a date night tease. Like Serena and Chuello are really on a date. And you really kind of get that. They arrive at the Commander Lawrence's, they arrive, and then in due fashion, Serena walks in and they're like, sorry, no spies allowed. Because clearly Commander Lawrence is the only person who really is like informing him, you're a spy. Shouldn't you be up to some spy shit? But of course he's not. He's like, fine. So he stays outside, which I can't imagine again what type of tradecraft. Like, I'm really hoping that he has been planting bugs, that he has his own Mission Impossible team. Like, I just can't imagine, like, you get inside of Gilead and all you're doing is escorting Serena. I cannot believe that whatever intelligence apparatus or infrastructure is allowing this to happen without them trying to get something on the go. So I'm just really hoping this is the payoff and Chuello just isn't a fucking moron. So anyway, he stays outside, and so then, again, I'm like, why did you even come if you know they're going to keep you outside or whatever? The only reason they haven't killed you is because you're like a diplomat from the United States. And honestly, he probably has some kind of diplomatic immunity, but again, I was just like, I'm so tired of Chuello showing up and then he just being left outside or whatever, or people hiding from him like he's, a Mormon or Jehovah's Witness showing up at the door. So Serena is greeted by Commander McKenzie and his wife. So when they first showed up on screen, I was like, they look familiar. Like, for some reason, I was like, why do I feel like I know them? Why do I recognize them? And so then Commander McKenzie says, the funeral was nice, but I kind of like the trial, like Commander Lawrence was trying to put together. And Serena it was so great because you could tell it was like she wanted to do the side eye, but she remembered she was in present company, so she kind of did almost a side eye, but not quite the side eye Commander Lawrence, which I was fun. So then they say, well, it was, Commander McKenzie was like, we also, it's too bad that Jude Osborne got to Fred. And Serena's like, what? You all know? He's like, we all know. We all know that she got some help from the Americans. Now, we don't know whether the Americans is a euphemism for the fractured United States and Canada, or whether the Americans is a euphemism for people within Gilead who are sympathetic to the American cause. That I was unsure about. So drop down in the comments and discuss. Do you think, when they use the euphemism Americans, is it really a euphemism, or is it they're really talking about what's left of the United States? Anyway, here comes Nick with his wife, Rose. Poor thing. I mean, ugh. So Rose comes in, and there's this awkward kind of tension, because they're coming in talking about June, and then Serena, of course, knowing how Nick feels about June. Nick knows how he feels about June. Commander Lawrence knows how he feels about June. The McKenzies don't know, and they're bad-mouthing June the whole time, and there's just kind of this very awkward thing. Now, Serena did have some manners. It's like, oh, do you know, Commander Blaine? He's an old friend. Good for Serena. She doesn't get half a point. No full point to Gryffindor, but half a point because instead of saying, yeah, he used to be my driver and he's on the come up. So good for at least knowing that she has some kind of home training. Then Serena's like politely like, how'd you meet? And she's like, oh, we met in DC, blah, blah, blah. And Serena's just kind of looking at her, looking at the wife, looking at Nick is like, but Serena has bigger fish to fry than Mick and his like hapless, empty marriage. So then anyway, here we go to Aunt Lydia. So we walk in the hospital and I'm like, please let Janine be dead. Please let Esther be dead. And so, it's a long shot. She's going through the hospital like, please let them be dead. Please let their just bodies be covered up by a sheet. Please, please, please. And we walk in and Esther's still alive. And I was like, ugh. I was like, I don't want Esther to be alive because I don't want to be subjected to the traumatic the trauma of them punishing Esther for the rest of her life for trying to kill herself. So I was just like, ugh, Esther's alive. So Aunt Lydia, is all, she walks in and she just gives this very scornful look at Aunt Lydia and is just looking around. And obviously, Aunt Lydia thinks, you've caused. What's amazing is she walked and Aunt Lydia immediately places the blame on Esther for the cause of the situation, right? But then as the scene progresses, and she slaps the comatose Esther, as her moment of rage, right? Because this is Esther's fault. But for Esther doing this, Janine would not be in a coma. So then we move to the scene then transitions to her walking down the hall. I was like, please let it be Janine in the body bag. Janine's still alive. But what's interesting now is when she looks at Janine, Aunt Lydia realizes that it is not Esther's fault, but rather her fault. So then she gets down her knees and asks God not to punish Janine for her bad choices, which is an understatement to say the least. All she was doing is trying to protect the girls. All she's trying to do right by them. Clearly, God, you must know this. And I was like, it's a very interesting and mystifying scene because on one level, Aunt Lydia is exhibiting this delusion in a bubble of self-awareness. She's aware that it's her behavior that has really caused this whole situation, but she's unwilling to be truthful about what I would call the continuum of which her behavior starts, right? So Aunt Lydia kind of goes, well, if I had treated Janine nicer, treated Esther nicer, then maybe this set of events did not happen. As opposed to going back to the entire participation, an entire chain of events, and kind of the toxicity and or the existence of the Handmaid's Tale, or the handmaids themselves, and how she contributed to that. Do you see how she does? She kind of isolates it to this part is my fault, but I'm not really taking responsibility for the rest of everything that I did. So I was just like, and you have the audacity to try to pray to God for this. And I was just like, girl, Jesus is always on the main line, but I know he was on the phone like. So anyhow, Aunt Lydia is done praying. So then we go to dinner at the Lawrences. And Commander Lawrence wants to talk shop. He's trying to seize that momentum of Serena's big stunt at the funeral. And then Commander Mackenzie, who I'm still like, how do I know him? Is like, well, let's not top shop. We don't want to bore the women. Once again, another sign. Most men, even though you don't want to have shop talk with your spouses, even though if they're not in the same industry, but it's not because the women aren't in the same industry, it's because they're women and they should not be privy to what's going on in the country that they're living in. So again, Serena's a fool. So he was like, but so the wife just was like, oh, once you get remarried, Commander Lawrence, you'll have a wife who knows how to steer dinner conversations. And Commander Lawrence is like, I don't plan on remarrying. Commander Mackenzie was like, Screech, we're going to discuss that too. Because you can't be in position of leaderships not doing the same get down that we're getting down. So I was like, interesting. Now my spidey sense is tingling. I was like, is what's going to happen what I think is going to happen? Tell me it's not going to happen. So I was like, okay. So then finally, they get to their comment in me about June and how she might come from Agnes. And I was like, oh shit, that's right. Commander Mackenzie is Hannah/Agnes's keeper. I'm not gonna call them parents, we'll just call them keeper. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they're like, oh, and we're concerned that she may come for Agnes. And we don't want to be, we don't want to be horrible to Agnes about who her birth mother is. And they called you a devil. And I was like, you should be scared. I mean, we know that June's capable of anything, but I was like, they kind of like putting on the most, and what's interesting is typically this would be a time for Serena to chime in and be like, oh yeah, she's just like, yeah, you don't know what she'll do, but she really didn't have the tambourine, like singing and jingling, fuck June type of thing. And I was like, why is that? Because Serena has bigger fish to fry. Once again, all the time, we're watching the scene as Serena's frying fish. And when we show you, we get to the reveal of the catfish she was trying to fry at the end. So I was like, what's going on with Serena? She's being really weird. And the bitch is frying fish in the background. So now, June has helped sewing or whatever back in the thing, waiting for a line to come open because they can't use cell phones to contact the commanders. They have to use sat phones or whatever. So June is in there. They're like, oh, we got some arsenic. We're going to kill a commander. And then suddenly a random man shows up and the Roadrunners are literally about to blow his brains out. They're like, who are you? We're like, where's Mike? Where's like, I'm with blah, blah, blah. She's our friend. And they're like, here's our code phrase. He's like, give me a minute. And the Roadrunner's like, ch-ch. And then finally the female friend shows up like, no, he's my friend. He's my friend. And then I realized the guy is an eye, like one of the suited people in Gilead who's helping the Roadrunners, pull people in. And she was like, you're going back in? And she's like, yeah, I got a wife and kid back there. Gotta go. Can't give, y'all are great and all, but, can't do anything about that. So I was like, huh. And June's like, So here comes June trying to fry some fish in the background. And I was like, oh, June, I already know what this fish is, and it ain't gonna taste good. So Chuello's outside twiddling his thumbs while they're meeting. Again, no kind of tradecraft. He's not scaling any walls. He's not planting any bugs. He's not doing any type of surveillance. He's flicking his lighter, in the middle of this whole thing. And I was like, oh. So here comes Nick. And he was like, oh, hi, Nick. And then they were talking. And then he was like, did you give it any thought? Nick's like, not really. And then here comes Commander McKenzie like, oh, y'all two know each other? What you gotta do, talk to America's CIA agent. And just dismisses Chuello. So again, Chuello's only job is to be dismissed, okay? So I don't know whether he's in the dismissal department and he's in the twirl away department, but all he does is show up to places and get dismissed. So then McKenzie's like, I hope Rose's father is a high commander. She goes, I hope High Commander Wharton's position was the reason you married Rose, and I'll be keeping my eye on you. And Nick was like, okay, right? What else can you do? But it's too hot for Nick. I don't know why Chuello thought Nick was an appropriate asset being the person the intelligence agencies use to get information from or contact. I was like, Nick was just never going to be that guy. He has too much to lose. He's too emotionally connected to the situation. Maybe they thought that like his investment or his connection with Nicole would make him want to turn on Gilead. But as we discussed last week, spies don't really do that well in Gilead. Like they always have a way of finding out. Like they are former Americans who know things about counterintelligence, about spycraft and tradecraft. And clearly they're doing it better than Chuello is because he hasn't found out anything yet. So now we get to the fish that Serena was frying in the background. So the way the scene sets up is like you see Serena in one chair, Commander Lawrence in another chair. And I said, oh, I know this fish, Serena. I know exactly what you're doing. I was like, is she going to do what I think she's going to do? And she's like, Eleanor has such a presence in this home. It's such a shame. And then it's like, he looks over at her finger and he's like, well, Fred hasn't cut off your finger. Once again, the only time we ever really mentioned the fact that Fred has really cut off Serena's finger as she's been crying crocodile tears, when she finally admits, Fred was a weak man. She doesn't think he'll be a good father. A father needs strength. And she's like, well, you're going to have to remarry if you want to stay in position of power. And pretty much I was like, come on, serve it up, Serena, serve it up. And then it's like, well, and he's like, Serena, marrying for power just doesn't work. And she's like, well, I don't know. And I want to put a pin in here because this is so apropos to what we really see really in contemporary society, right? A lot of white women really believe that their only source of power is their proximity to another white man in power, right? Because Serena recognizes that she cannot just be a pregnant single mom in Gilead, that her only source of validity, her only source of agency, her only freedom in her life is going to come in proximity and in connection to another man of power, okay? She didn't go to a low level. Serena always shoots it's called outkicking your coverage. Serena is constantly trying to outkick her coverage. And it's just very apropos to what we really see in society because a lot of women do believe that their only sense of validity, agency, worth, and esteem only comes in their connection to another man. And so we really again see Serena for all her great, qualities, which are few and far between, peddling this Gilead bullshit back and forth. So, Commander Lawrence like, so sorry, no fish for me. Now, back in the hospital, here comes Miss Putnam with Angela. I was like, what? And Lydia's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. She's like, yeah, I really didn't have any choice. So somebody somehow told her to come on down with Angela. And Angela, is there. She's like, and Lydia's like, well, remember Janine kind of helped Angela when she's in the hospital? It really helped her, and maybe it helped her. Miss Putnam's like, okay. And then, Angela starts playing with Janine, and she's like, Miss Putnam goes up to Janine and is like, I'll be sure to tell her where she got her beautiful smile from. Like, pretty much, because the doctors have said, Janine's going to pretty much die. The chances don't look that good. And of course, Aunt Lydia is beside herself. The gall. So, anyway, we back to the end of Chuello and Serena's date night. And they're walking in the, down the hotel, and he's like, truly trying to be like, yeah, I can't say it's a fun night. Right, because you stood in the cold the whole night. She's like, I really thought that they put you somewhere warm, meaning that you knew they were going to do this to him. Why didn't you just tell him this anyway? So I was like, whatever. So then Serena's like, can you come in for a second? And I was like, are you about to try to fuck him like right before, like, I don't know what that is. I was like, is this about to happen? I was like, what? And he was like, sure. He was like, she's like, I'm staying. He's like, what? I'm gonna stay in Gilead. There's so much work to be done. Because prior to them entering, he had made a comment about having studied Gilead so much and how it really was not what he had thought it would be. Is actually worse because it's a great idea with a lot of hypocrisy. So then she's gonna be like, it's just pity you haven't seen all the good things we've done here. She, of course, could not name them, but she then says there was. So anyway, he's like, Serena, girl, you are not safe here. You are a woman. She's like, I'll be fine, right? And then she kissed him on the cheek, and it was like, on to the next man. So what we see really is Serena just using these men, right, to get what she wants, right? She got Lawrence, she thinks she's got Commander Lawrence, she has Chuello in her pocket, and she's just gonna hopscotch her way all the way up to the top of Gilead power because she thinks she's just gonna be able to kiss and beguile and belittle all these white men, but they have a surprise for her. So, anyway, the date night's over. Chuello's looking heartbroken, like a whole ass fool, and I'm really hoping this is him acting. Again, this is stratecraft, and not him being a whole ass fool. Don't they provide dossiers? Like, is there not like psych out people in the intelligence being like, do not trust this person, do not get close to this person? But he's really acting all like heartbroken, like she decided to take his best friend to the prom, to the prom type of shit. And I was like, ugh. Anyway, Lily wakes up June, and it's Nick on the phone. So she runs to the phone, and Nick is like, Hannah's safe. She's not with Serena anymore. She's like, oh, okay. What's this color mean? Because earlier in the teaser, one of the things Jean kept saying was, what's that color? What's that color? What's that color? And no one knew what purple meant, okay? We knew what teal, we know the red, the crimson, the white. Purple's a new color they've introduced. So we're like, what does this purple mean? And most of us were like, it means she's about to be on the host streets. And we were like, she's about to be ready. They're training her to be a wife. So then all of a sudden, June's like, oh, hecky, nah. She's like, what? She's 12. They're treating her to be a wife. She goes, yeah, the McKinseys really love her. They're like, they can't love her that much if they really want her to be a wife. So June is now about to spin the fuck out. So then he's like, well, so then June's like, well, how about you transfer to DC and keep an eye on her? That's a big ask. But again, people, I guess part of the B storyline of this show is people asking Nick for shit that they know he cannot and should not be doing. Like him asking to be transferred to DC is not going to set off any red flags to anybody. So anyway, he's like, you know what, I can't. I have obligations. Subtext. Then we go to the direct line, I now have a wife. And here is June, all kind of weepy. And I'm like, you got a whole ass husband who you're fucking in your whole ass house. Like, how are you gonna be weepy about this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just built different. I don't know. I'm too pragmatic to be what it. So she's all weepy. So then she's like, oh, okay, I totally understand. Then he's like, and we won't be having more conversations like this for a while. Which is, don't be calling on me, blowing on my line, because again, their eyes are on me, figuratively and literally. And so she's okay. And, at first it seems like it's kind of this one-sided kind of, love affair, and June's all kind of weepy. And then we see Nick start flashing back to their times together. And then she's like, try to be happy, try to be okay. He's like, okay. Sad Nick hangs up the phone. Okay, fine, whatever. Now, Aunt Lydia wakes up and Janine's bed's empty. I'm like, Janine died. They're about to burn her body, cremate her. No. Janine's awake, getting some fresh air, Now, what was interesting is she comes outside and she looks at Janine, and Janine's like, excuse me, and Lydia's like, oh, thank you, God. And Janine is not looking too happy. So it's very going to be interesting to see, do we think we're going to get a changed Janine, or are we going to get a Janine who's just going to dive more into the Kool-Aid? Because Janine was not looking like Gilead is my home, this is my glory, this is my savior all the day long kind of thing. She really looked like, you know what, June was right. I should have known better. Whatever. Now we get to Serena at the council meeting. So at the Indian scene with Chuello, the maitre d', the concierge, and informs Serena that she needs to be at the council meeting. So Serena shows up at the council meeting the next day at 11 o'clock. So she's out there, and she's kind of like, okay, because she knows it could go one or two ways. She's thinking either they're gonna make her a handmaid, or she's gonna be elevated to Queen of Gilead. Of course, Serena thinks it's the latter. Till Commander Lawrence shows up. So Commander Lawrence shows up, and he's like, hey, what's going on? She's like, did you call this meeting? She's like, no, I didn't. And they're like, oh, okay. And then there's like this awkward silence, and he goes, is there anything you're expecting from me? And Serena's kind of like, no. And he's like, okay. And then he does sorry, Serena. And I was like, oh no. I was like, she's about to get got. I was like, they about to send her, they about to take her baby out and send her to the Handmaid's thing. That would be my hope. But of course, on episode 3, not so much. So he starts off and she's like, oh, hi, Serena. We've given your situation a lot of consideration. Pause. This is why you should have stayed your happy, conniving, deceitful ass in Canada, so men won't be looking at you full ass pregnant, talking about they've given your situation consideration, and they can make decisions about your whole ass life without your input. But Serena don't believe fat meat is greasy either. So then they're like, we'd like to make you a global ambassador of sorts. Unofficially, with the success of your stunt, we realize it's good to have a woman kind of speaking on our behalf. Unofficially. So Serena kind of does this puff up like, okay, I can do some global ambassador, okay. And then they go back in Toronto. She was like, what? They're like, back in Toronto. And then Commander Lawrence says, our final subtext for the episode, we don't have the proper infrastructure for an unusual woman like you. Well, really what he says is, Serena, you are an unusual woman. And we do not have the proper infrastructure for an unusual woman like you. Meaning, you're pregnant, you got a big ass mouth, you have a propensity for stunts, and you're a snake with a long ass memory. We don't need any of these things in our country. Okay? Plus, your husband's a traitor. So the fact that you think that he's some John F. Kennedy Jr., you, your baby, go fuck back to Toronto, and then there, whatever. Now, in classic Serena form, she took out her knife and made some lemonade. She's like, I want a staff, I want a big salary, and I want protection. They're like, okay. Because, bitch, they don't want you there. It did not matter. They will give you just about whatever you wanted, because you can't stay there. So now she's like, right, because now You done told Chuello you don't need him no more. You don't love him no more. He can't be your lover and the secretary and whatever. So now you got to go back to him and be like, yeah, I'm coming back. And now you done stunted the whole ass fuck all over June thinking you're going to be safe in Gilead. When in reality, now you got to go back to Toronto where she is and know that she can get her hands on you again. So, anyway, this again, such a large allegory for white women playing themselves in proximity to white power, but the show is not done yet. Now we get there and June is pissed. She's off the phone with Lily. She's like, and then finally Lily comes in and goes, they're escorting Serena back to Toronto. She's like, she's coming back? And she's like, yeah. And June was like, I was like, what you about to do? Because you know June will come up with any good ideas, okay? Like, I take that back. Half her ideas are good, half her ideas are bad. So it's just always a net zero with June, because it's always the execution and the landing, the 10 toes down, that June kind of messes up on. So Serena's coming back. She's also, she gets off the plane. So she gets on the plane, and Chuello's like, what happened? You had to change your heart? They told us to hold the plane. Meaning that when they got ready to leave the night before, they knew that Serena was gonna go back to Toronto. That was the thing, that was their plan the entire time. And Serena played herself. So she tried to skip, so she doesn't even say anything to try to keep whatever shred of dignity that she has. So the plane lands, so she's in her car, trying to be all mopey molly. And then here comes the people in the vigil. Side note, fuck these people in these vigil. If you like Gilead so much and you think that Gilead is so great, you can go to Gilead. I don't see none of these Canadian women running over there to Gilead. Like, that's the most ridiculous, that is so, it's so typical, but so not of people who just like to be on shit just to be on shit. Because why the fuck, Gilead can't be that great, why don't you move there? Okay, and this isn't why don't you go back to the country you came from type of talk. This is, if you think the principles and ideas of Gilead are so great, you can go to Gilead and live that life. And to see like women there like, oh, Serena, I was like, ugh, people in there bullshit. But Serena, being the Martha Stewart of bad situations, is like, the guy's like, oh, look like you have such a crowd. Oh, just service of God. Serena is going to end up starting, here we go, she's going to try to start her own little Gilead following and made herself some outside cult piece sitting in Toronto that's going to make sure for her to think that she's untouchable from Gilead, or like Gilead too. Or you're going to see Serena try to start a second and competing Gilead in Canada, okay? Not as submersive, but you know, kind of some Gilead light shit. Like, this is what I'm thinking, is Serena's going to be like, okay, maybe I could do this the right way, you know, without Fred's help and without the kind of like murdering congressman type of thing. We'll see how it goes. But, you know, since they are providing her with protection, a salary, and money, I can see her intentionally trying to subvert Gilead, but Serena's cooking up a really bad idea. Because, again, like June, her foil, half her ideas are good, the other half are bad. So we get a final scene, she's driving, and they get to the bridge, and I said, they're not. And then the car in front with the headlights. I said, is that June? And then it's like, what's going on? What's going on? And so then I was like, tell me that's not June. Then we see June on the window. And I was like, you. And June's like, what was it? Never touch my daughter again. Never touch my daughter again. And Serena is shooketh. Not shook, not shaken. She is shooken to the Bible days shooketh. Because the last thing her happy ass needed to see, as she has now been shuffled the fuck out of Gilead, is June banging on her door, being like, bitch, I can get to you any motherfucking time. Do you see how easy this was? So I was like, now of course, Moira and Luke are gonna be like, I can't believe you did that. I'm all for it. Serena needed to be shaken, because you don't pull a stunt like you pulled that was such a grandiose level, and then also so definitely personal to June. I think there aren't gonna be consequences. It's like people talking about free speech all the time. free speech, free speech, free speech. Free speech does not mean freedom from consequences, okay? And what Serena is lacking in her life is a whole ass set of consequences, missing finger and all. Because consequences don't matter to Serena, because Serena thinks that consequences are not for people like her. So that's why she thinks, I'm missing a finger, I have 9 left. That's the thought process. Most people say, I'm missing a finger, never again. But Serena's like, I got 9 fingers left, I'm okay, or whatever. So anyway, I told y'all that stunt will be costly. That's the problem with stunting on people who have just about nothing to lose. They will get to you. So once again, here are our questions. Are we really going to see a change, Janine? Or are we going to see Janine back to her old bullshit again? And what do you think? Is Chuello as shitty a spy as I'm really thinking he is? Or do you think that he's really good at this, that he really has been up to something really good all along the way? Because when Serena landed, he was like, they'll take you back to the detention center. But we're like, you're acting all heartbroken and upset. Like, ugh. You know, like again, so tell me, do you think Chuello is really up to some nefarious James Bond stuff and he's gonna pop out with like, ta-da, I brought Gilead down during the weekend I was there for Fred's funeral? Or is he really as a shitty spy as he really is making himself out to be? So anyway, that is Handmaid's Tale Season 5, Episode 3, Border. Oh, Border. That's the last thing we're gonna discuss. So the episode is called Border. Now, in the beginning, it seems like, oh, it's because June's at the border between Canada and no man's land, and they're, trying to get into the thing. But actually, border has a larger meaning and context. So when you think of a border is typically borders or boundaries are used to let people know where they are, where they can go, and where they cannot go. So in this episode, one of the things that was very clear is that June and Serena both were made very clear where they were, where they cannot go, and where the spaces they were living in. And I thought that was a very, very excellent use. And also what we also see is that June and Serena have also crossed a border. So if you know that the tale of crossing the Rubicon or crossing a Rubicon, meaning that you have crossed a point at which you cannot come back from. It's a tale from the ancient Romans when Hannibal had crossed the Rubicon into Rome. The Rubicon was the final barrier into Rome. Once he crossed the Rubicon, war with Rome was inevitable. So both women have both crossed their respective Rubicons. June, in the murder of Fred, can't unring that bell. Fred's dead. Serena, in this stunt of a funeral, and then hoisting Hannah up to kind of taunt June. Both have really crossed borders and transgressed lines that they cannot come back from. So that's why it's not called borders, but border. Both women have both crossed lines at which they cannot come back from. So that I thought was a very interesting use of a title and a very interesting way to kind of capsulize really where women are. And again, who's the foil to who? So in this episode, would you say that Serena was the foil to June, or was June more the foil to Serena? So again, Handmaid's Tale, Season 5, Episode 3, Border. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.